How space affects women and men differently. Some 564 people have been into space, 65 of them women. That's despite the fact that the first woman in space, Soviet cosmonaut Valentina Tereshkova, went into orbit as early as 1963. It took NASA 20 years to catch up, and in 1983 Sally Ride became the third woman, and first American woman to go into space. Before her voyage, she was asked by the media if she was taking any makeup on her trip and whether she cried when there were malfunctions in the flight simulator. On Friday, the 18th of October, NASA conducted its first ever all-female spacewalk, after plans earlier this year were scrapped because of a lack of medium-sized spacesuits to fit one of the astronauts. Does space affect men and women differently? Overall adaptation to the space environment is roughly the same for men and women, but there are some differences. Women are more likely to feel sick when they go into space. Men are more likely to get re-entry sickness when they come back to Earth. Men have more problems with their vision and hearing when they get back from space, which women don't get. When women return, they do have problems managing their blood pressure, so they feel quite faint. So there are some subtle differences, and we don't know if that's to do with hormonal differences or more physiological changes that are occurring. And long-term, understanding those differences will help us understand more about human health on Earth. What about periods in space? When the Americans sent Sally Ride up into space, the questions that NASA had were about what would happen to women's periods and how do we account for this. Female astronauts said at the time, "Let's consider it non-problem until it becomes a problem." But space travel is a bit like a camping trip, and the engineers had to plan things like how many sanitary products were needed. Because it was a very male-dominated world, the figures that they thought they needed were 100 or 200 tampons for a week. They shortly came to the conclusion that that many weren't needed. Most female astronauts now use a contraceptive pill to stop their periods, and it is safe for them to do so because they are healthy women. One of the parts of my work was to research other ways for women to stop their periods, to see if things like the contraceptive coil could be more effective. Why are toilets in space sometimes a challenge for women? There are 2 toilets on the International Space Station, but the engineers hadn't originally accounted for blood. In space, urine isn't wasted, it's recycled and drinking water is reclaimed from it. Period blood is considered a solid material, and none of the toilets on the space station can differentiate solid from liquid material, therefore the water in it is lost and not recycled. There are also limitations on how water can be used for washing, so the practicalities of personal hygiene while menstruating during spaceflight can be challenging.